Disarming Somalia. After years of civil war and instability, the country is awash with weapons. But can the government disarm the many militias and create peace for all its people? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zaidan. Well, Somalia has been largely lawless for almost 25 years. Since the outbreak of civil war in 1991, the country has lurched from one transitional government to another. And in the power vacuum that emerged, dozens of competing militia and warlords have jostled for influence, not to mention the armed group Al-Shabaab, of course. Well, the current government has realised it can only bring lasting security by disarming Somalia's fighting groups. And it's pinning its hopes on African-led peacekeeping troops who are supporting its army on a mission to get rid of thousands of weapons. But as Mohammed Ado reports from Mogadishu, the task hasn't been easy.
After years of struggling to assert its control, the Somali government seems to have realized the need to scoop up illegal weapons. Here, African Union peacekeepers and government troops raid the houses of people they call warlords and suspected militia leaders. Officials call this operation a success and say they will continue until they bring back a measure of stability to the country.
We will not stop until we reach a point where we will need only a warrant of arrest and not guns to arrest criminals. The current chaos cannot continue forever.
But not every militia leader has been disarmed. This man is one of those keen on keeping their private armies. Yusuf Indade, a former warlord, says his men fight for the government, and that has earned him enemies.
The government should provide adequate security for people who might be targeted, or let them keep their weapons. Though I believe people like me won't be disarmed, we are waiting to see the government's response.
Somalia has known little peace for the last 24 years. Clan warlords, war profiteers and militias have battled for control. A massive free-for-all trade in arms has been fueling the conflict between them. Just a few days ago, this street was one of Somalia's biggest arms markets. The traders have now abandoned it, and they've taken the massive trading guns here underground. In one of the city's suburbs, we met these young men trying to sell an AK-47 rifle. With their market closely watched by the government, they are now officially part of Mogadishu's illegal trade in arms.
We will continue to sell arms to anyone who needs them until the government provides us with alternative employment. This is our job, the only one we know and all that we care about.
Disarming the whole of Somalia will be no easy task, and many here believe it can't be done just by force, but months and maybe even years of negotiating with militiamen and clan elders. The government will also have to reassure those who bear arms that it has the capacity to fully protect them now. Mohammed Ado, Aljazeera, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, to discuss this further, let's bring in our guests into the show. From Mogadishu, we have Ridwan Haji Abdul Wali, Somali government spokesman and communications advisor to the Prime Minister. In London, Jamal Osman, a journalist with the UK's Channel 4 television. And also in Mogadishu, Abdi Ainte, director of the Heritage Institute for Policy Studies. Thank you all for joining us. If I could start with Mr. Abdul Wali, is the disarmament campaign working, sir?
Yes, thank you very much. I think this campaign is really something that the people of Somalia, particularly people in Mogadishu, are welcoming. And we are not saying that this government is disarming all the Somalis, whether in Mogadishu or across Somalia. What we are doing now is to make sure to not allow every group or every individuals to have a large number of weapons. We are trying that every citizen has the right to protect himself, and the government of Somalia is also ready to protect himself at this time. But we will not accept we will not accept any kind of group militia or any individuals that are carrying a large number of weapons, and they are actually saying that we want to protect ourselves.
Could I get you to clarify that, sir? Then, how, if you say people will not be allowed to have a large number of weapons, it sounds like you're saying there's some sort of quota on the number, or is it types of weapons, or is it specific groups or militias that you will allow to carry weapons? What exactly is the formula?
Well, I did not say that, and I don't mean this, but what I mean is that we know that the government of Somalia is trying to bring stability in the country. The government of Somalia is trying to control security of the country. But, you know, this government is trying to do a lot, and at the same time, we are having a lot of difficulties. There are a lot of challenges. Therefore, what I mean is that the government of Somalia can accept if, for example, a member of parliament or a minister or a businessman or some individuals that are doing or working in the country, they could have, or they can have, like security forces, for example, a small number of security forces, which is fine. But if we will not accept, you know, having 100 or 200 militia and then saying they are my security. That's what we are avoiding. Also, what we are trying is to make sure that, you know, this kind of weapons may not go to the hands of Al-Shabaab or any other criminals groups. Therefore, we have the rights, we have the mandate to control all these weapons, and this is what we are exactly doing at the moment. So I think that needs to be very clear. We are not supporting any team, or we are not targeting any individuals or any particular area of the country.
That message is very clear indeed. Let's bring in Mr. Ainti into the discussion. Headlines over the last few months have talked about assassinations of members of parliament, attacks on the presidency. Do people feel the security situation has improved yet as a result of this campaign?
Well, I think that's too early to tell. I think the objective of creating a monopoly of violence on the part of the government is a legitimate objective. There's no doubt about that. But I think that there should be a process to achieve that objective. And I think what most Somalis are now expressing is that even though they overwhelmingly support a disarmament campaign, that there needs to be a framework whereby people can refer to a legal framework, a reconciliation, a proper DDR, disarmament and demobilization and reintegration of militia, as well as a legal infrastructure that supports all of this. I think what people are now worried about is that this campaign might have the unintended consequence of, in fact, creating further instability. Remember, in the last year, security in Mogadishu has deteriorated significantly. Some 5 members of parliament have been killed, in addition to countless other people. The presidency had been attacked twice since the beginning of the year. The parliament had been attacked. The judiciary had been attacked. Key supporters of the Somali government, like the United Nations and the Turkish embassy, and all of them have been attacked. And so the city certainly feels a lot less secure than it was about a year ago. So if you add this new layer of targeting people who are certainly armed and not in the most legitimate means, that might create instability. I think people are looking for a process.
All right. On that point of a process then, Mr. Osman, what is happening then to militias once they are disarmed? Is there a process for what happens to these people to reintegrate them back into society, as Mr. Ainti was talking about there?
I think I came back from Mogadishu 2 weeks ago, and I saw some of these incidents with my own eyes. And I don't think the government has thought through about disarming these armed men, and it's been rushed through for, I don't know the reason, but it's been rushed through.
And I think what haven't they thought through? Let's get a little more specific if we could. What do you see that's missing when you were there?
Because Somalia has been, in particular Mogadishu, a sort of lawless place for more than 20 years. And these armed men or warlords or militiamen have been somewhat ruling parts of Mogadishu. They are well armed, they have their clan support, they have their militiamen. So to just go and disarm them and attack them would not bring any solution. I think because these militiamen are not necessarily against the government. They are not fighting necessarily against the government, but they don't feel safe enough to lay down their arms. And I think the government needs to have some sort of process to bring them on board or to be part of the government, or at least dialogue and talk to them, because we know Somalia's history, fighting will not bring any solution.
Okay, but hang on.
The government
once disarmed, are the areas, Mr. Osman, not being filled by government forces in order to prevent a vacuum from occurring?
No, they don't have. They might have some sort of security forces, but the Somali government does not have a Somali army. It's still some of these so-called Somali armies are belonging to a particular clan. So I think the first thing they need to do is to gain the trust of the Somali public, and they have to be seen to be a government for everyone. And people in Mogadishu, many of them, see some of these ministers who obviously belong to a clan to be advancing their clan interests. So I think they risk alienating some of these powerful armed men who can use their clan influence to turn Mogadishu into
more
trouble
in the long term. All right, let's bring in Mr. Abdelwali back into the discussion then. Some points which have come up, sir. Is the government thinking things through when it comes to what happens after you disarm people? Are you giving them an alternative? And do you have the troops? You don't have an army. Do you have the security personnel to put back into neighborhoods which were formerly controlled by the people you've disarmed?
First of all, I think the legislation of disarming people is not yet done, and that must be very clear.
But you're already moving to disarm before the legislation is done.
It's not like that the government of Somalia is, disarming the people of Somalia or the whole, the country. I said what is going on is a certain sort of, operations that and the reason is actually to improve the security of the city. The reason is to make sure that Al-Shabaab will not or cannot have access to buy, sort of guns or weapons and then kill our people or our, government officials or MPs. What happened in Mogadishu for the last couple of months, the assassination of MPs, the sort of explosions that took place in many parts of the cities. And then we have intelligence, and then we thought this is very important. We have to know exactly who is carrying a large number of weapons. We need to register, all kind of weapons. That's
understood,
very clear.
Mr. Abdelwali, if you can hear me.
Of course,
I think nobody is arguing that those are not very sensible, necessary steps that a state needs to take. But the question is, do you provide an alternative to all of these, perhaps hundreds or thousands of people who were militiamen and are now unarmed, and are you able to secure the areas which they once were in control of?
Well, I don't think we are having hundreds of thousands of militia. Most of the militia are now part of the Somali government. They get training, and then we need to rehabilitate them. We need to provide the sort of needs that they want. Also, we are trying to make sure that any citizens, whether a former an MP or whether is a former commissioner, we want them also to have their protection. That is also our aim, and the vision is to make sure that every citizen is having the right to live and the right to security. And I think the Somali people are very tired, and they need more sort of, stability. They need a sort of disarmament. I think it will come soon. Also, they want to see a Somali government working on the ground. And then we also working a lot of projects in terms of investing, youth or integration among Somalis. What we are now sure is that Somalia had a sort of lawlessness and conflict for the last 21 years. This time is the time to move on.
Okay, allow me to jump in there.
Somalis
and let's see if we can get some forgive me for interrupting. Let me bring Mr. Ainte into the discussion and see if we can move things on a little bit. The government's political transition plan, Vision 2016, is it giving sufficient attention to the need for reconciliation, to end the feeling that people have their need for arms in the first place?
The Vision 2016 is a comprehensive document. It came out of a national conference, and its intentions and its contents are very clear and are very sensible ones. I think the government can do a lot better in achieving much of the goals that were outlined in the Vision 2016 document. A lot of it included, for example, creating a National Reconciliation Commission, which is yet to be created, and other tools that the government could have mobilized for reconciliation. I think it's important to highlight that nobody is disagreeing with the government's intention here, which is to disarm people who are illegally armed, so to speak. But I think the government has to address the fundamental issue of the need for people to provide themselves or to procure arms and to have militias in the first place. And secondly, to create a framework, a legal process, a very clear one, and a civic education campaign that informs people who have been in an armed society for the past 24 years. And all of this is outlined clearly in the Vision 2016 document if it's implemented the right way.
Is this being done then back to front in a sense? I mean, shouldn't you first sort out some of those issues, particularly when it comes to legislation of, you know, who's allowed to carry what, before you try disarmament process?
Exactly the point. I mean, the fact that now the parliament hasn't passed the legislation to disarm people who are armed is in and of itself an indication that we're putting the cart before the horse. I think the government can do itself a favor. The greatest risk of all of this operation is that it creates another threat within the city. The one big threat that everybody in Mogadishu had for the past 2 years or so was Al-Shabaab. And now we're potentially creating a parallel group of people who have a vested interest to keep their arms. A lot of these people, as Jamal pointed out, are key allies of the government, and some of them have actually sacrificed a lot to defend this government and to bring this government about where it is today.
All right, Jamal, if you really want to disarm all the non-state actors, then you're going to have to go after, ultimately, are you not, some of the clan power bases. How much of a conflict could this create, as you were highlighting or alluding to there, with sections between the government and sections of Somali society, the very fabric of Somali society?
I think it could potentially create a huge conflict. I think most Somalis agree that Mogadishu needs to be demilitarized in a sense, and you only need to drive on the road to see how these crazy militiamen and armed men are ruining the city and sort of destroying the image of Mogadishu and creating fear within the society. So I think there is a general agreement that Mogadishu needs to be civilized in a way. But it's how the government is going about, which is, as I said, these militiamen belong to clans. And government ministers who are trying to implement this belong to clans. So some of these militiamen are interpreting these disarmaments as being sort of targeted by other clans who are trying to weaken them in order to strengthen other clans. So I think it could create a clan conflict. And if the government is not very careful how it goes about it. And as I said, the government does not have the sort of an alternative. They are not providing an alternative forces. They don't have military forces who can replace these guys. They are using foreign forces like AMISOM to disarm these guys. But who is going to provide security for the local people? And the other issue, I think, there is no consistency. The government is not going after any warlord or militiaman. They are targeting some, but leaving others. And that is also making people quite suspicious why the government is targeting some particular armed men who belong again to particular clans and leaving others.
That's a very important point, Mr. Osman. Let me take it back to Mr. Abdul Wali. Your response, sir, to suggestions that the government is being very inconsistent in how it approaches, or the groups it approaches, to disarm. Might that not create more instability?
First of all, I don't agree with Jamal that we are still, or I don't agree with him that our military or our national security belongs to the interest of a clan, or that the ministers belongs to a clan. Of course, we know that the Somalis are now moving from a clan system to a democratic elections in 2016, and this is the process we are trying to move on. But I think this time I don't see that the people of Somalia or any government officials.
Are you saying that members of parliament,
stick with
members of parliament do not herald from clans? I mean, that is a reality, is it not, in the Somali society? A lot of the militias are part of clans. The federal system, critics say, is based on clans.
Yes, it's based on clan, but they don't work on the interest of a clan. That's what I mean. Of course, every member of parliament belongs to an area, and they represent that area. Every minister is also the same. But a Minister of Education is not only supporting or any, providing some sort of assistance to a clan. That's what I mean. So that should be very clear. The second thing is that, of course, Somalia...
Sorry, so let me give a chance to Mr. Osman. He wants to come in. I can see he's angling for a comeback on that one.
Yeah, sorry, as you said, the whole government is based through clan lines, so you cannot deny our society is based on clan. The government is based on clan. And you can say the ministers are not acting on behalf of their particular clans. But the reality on the ground is that many people would love to see a national government, ministers who are thinking the greater good of the nation, but people see them as belonging to Clan A or Clan B, and that is the reality on the ground. So
let me bring Mr. Abdulwali back, to be fair to him. Sorry, I have to interrupt you as well, Mr. Osman. Let me bring Mr. Abdulwali back for a quick comment on that one.
I don't think that there is a threat at the moment between the Somalis and the clan. I mean, that is something forgotten. That is something that has been past. What we are now moving is from, this sort of transitional government and also into a democratic elections in 2016. I know we are having a long road, of course. We have to work hard. We have to make sure that reconciliation is in the process. We have to make sure that we need to train and provide more sort of logistics to our security forces. We need to rebuild our institutions, and that is what the government of Somalia is trying to do.
Indeed. Since we've got just a minute left,
what I would
forgive me.
Also to add,
since we've got only a minute left, let me just give a final chance, if you don't mind, to Mr. Ainte. Looking at some of those political goals on the timeline, which Mr. Abdulwali was mentioning there, elections, saying goodbye to foreign troops, writing a new constitution, all of that's supposed to be taking place in 2016. I mean, is that possible?
Well, first of all, we should make it very clear that clan, so to speak, is not a problem in Somalia. Clanism is the problem. And we should also make it very clear that the government is not targeting, as far as we can tell, one clan over the other in the disarmament campaign. Having said that, are we going to have elections as we know them in 2016? It is highly improbable, if not impossible at all. I think we will probably go back to some sort of a selectocracy as we have had it in 2012. I think one of the possibilities that could happen before 2016 is the review and implementation of the Constitution, which is now making some progress, even though it should have made progress long ago, but it's now making some progress. I think the fundamental issue that is we're talking about in Somalia when it comes to security or Vision 2016 is that we have chronically weak state institutions, particularly the security institutions. And there is a tendency to focus only on the chiefs of security, as was the case last month. They were replaced. But I think at the bottom and at the middle level, we have very weak security institutions that we need to address them more systemically.
Mr. Ainte, sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt
then we can talk about possibly elections and others.
We are running out of time, so I apologize for that. Let's thank our guests joining us here, Mr. Abdulwali, Mr. Ainte and Mr. Osman. And of course, you can let us know your thoughts by leaving your comments on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or go to @AJ Inside Story on Twitter. I'm Sami Zaidan. Thanks for watching. For now, it's goodbye.